All right, welcome back to the worm bin. We're getting back to our red wigglers. This is day 58 with them. Today's December 20th, so today is day 58. And we're just going to check in on them. And I'm going to reveal one of the things that I really got wrong with this bin that I'm really glad to have learned a little bit more about to correct. So as you can see here, we're just taking off this worm blanket, which is we put on last time. You can really see that it's got some of that fuzz on there, which is really great. Which means that at some point soon, hopefully the worms, well, probably not soon, but eventually the worms will probably be able to break that down as well. But as we dig in here, I'm actually going to do it barehanded and just kind of get a feel of the moisture. There's a worm right there if you can see it. I'll try to get you in closer actually. I'll get you in closer. You can see a worm right there. One of the things that I've become aware of, I recently worked on my bin that I harvested, and that one was not red wigglers. And it showed me that this bin, I was keeping it at a moisture level that was too dry for the winter. And as I dig down, I really feel like that worm, that blanket and the watering that we did has really helped. You can see another worm right there, wiggling away. Right here where my finger is. But it seems like our last watering really helped out because the material feels a lot more moist. And that is definitely desirable. So the thing that I got wrong was that I was under the impression that in the winter you would want to keep it dry. And that was very wrong. You actually want to try to keep the bin more moist during the winter. And I got to thinking about that after going through the bin that I harvested and seeing how dense the population was, how well the worms seemed to be doing, and that just showed me that I really needed to up the moisture level in this bin because it was nowhere near as moist. So I'm actually going to add more moisture to this bin. This is actually more moist than it's been at previous times, but it's still not quite as moist as it should be. Now, for what it's worth, we are seeing a lot of worm activity just about everywhere we go, so that's good. But I think that will only get better as we moisten the bin. So there are a few ways we can moisten it. Previously, I've shown you how I moisten the bin using a water bottle, a spray bottle like this, and that's great. I use water that is non-chlorinated to help with not killing or hampering the growth of the microbes that the worms are actually eating. But today I'd like to moisten the bin in a different way, and I'm going over to one of my bokashi bins. If you've watched that portion of my channel, you'll know that I put the food waste that I use in these worm bins through the bokashi method. And so this is a bin that I had, and it contained some fruit. But what I'm actually after in this bin is what's in the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and take off the top bin, which contains the food. And I'm going to come down here, and you'll see wood chips. And this was actually a neat idea that I got from another vermicomposter whose channel is called Gardens of New England. And that channel is really, really helpful as far as going into some of the depths, especially with regard to adding bokashi to your worm bin, that channel, and also the channel World Composting. Those are the two channels that I've really seen prior to this one that actually incorporate bokashi in their worm bins. And I think it's a really great addition. So what I'm going to do, with the idea from Gardens of New England, I started putting wood chips into the bottom bin to kind of catch the effluent or the drippings from my bokashi. And what that does is it kind of soaks these wood chips in those juices. And as you can tell, it's not overly wet. There is some standing water in there, but this is not going to be enough to flood the bin. But I think it's going to be a great addition to just help with the moisture level. And also adding in you can see that as I'm pouring this, there is going to be there's a little bit of just standing moisture, but for the most part, the moisture is actually found and kind of locked in by those wood chips, those saturated wood chips. So just going to empty that in there, and then I figure we can work that through. Now, these wood chips have not necessarily been fermented, but they're going to have some neat moisture to them. And they're probably going to have some sugars as well, which will help to feed the microbes in this bin. And then in addition to that, I think I will also check out the top of this bokashi bin, and you can see, wow, look at that. All right, so this was a bunch of cantaloupe and pineapple. So, wow, look at that. You can see how quickly it's just falling apart in here. You can easily these leaves just fall right out. So I'm gonna go ahead and look at all of that accumulation there, the white fuzz. That is going to be fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and put one of those in there. Oh wow, yeah, this is really soft to the touch. That's one of the beautiful things about using bokashi, is that the food items are pre-digested, and that just helps the worms, because the worms are they're truly after the microorganisms, the microbes that are breaking these things down. And by doing bokashi, I'm basically supercharging those microbes, giving them a perfect environment, and they are loving all of this sugar that's gathered on here, and they will just break that stuff down. So I'm gonna get as much as I can. Got some of the leaves. Those might take a little bit longer to break down than these other pieces from the rind that actually contain some fruit on them. But yeah, we're gonna get in there and give them as much as possible. The reason that I really like doing the bokashi like this is that even though with the double bin specifically, is that even though the food is moist, it's not wet, and it really allows me to be able to control the moisture level that I'm adding to my bin, which is really helpful this winter, right? If I'm trying to add more moisture to the bin, then I can get into the bottom bucket here and add additional moisture. But the food itself gets broken down, already has some moisture. And so I'm really excited to see what the worms do with all of this food. One of the benefits of doing this in the winter, and one of the I really think that the winter can can be a time for your bin to really explode, because you're not dealing with quite as many of the pests that you would in the summertime, like the flies that are opportunistic and take advantage of the food that you're adding in. And you're also hoping for higher moisture levels. And those things, especially the moisture levels, well, the food and the moisture levels provide a perfect environment for the worms to really thrive. So I am really excited to see how this goes. I'm going to dig further down into the bin and put some of this down there. So just kind of nestling it down under some of the existing material. One of the things that I would like to as well comment on is that the last time we were in the bin, I recall the chaff really not being quite this moist. In fact, now when you look at it, it's really difficult to distinguish the chaff from the other materials. So that is really promising. And I'm actually going to go ahead and add a little layer of chaff over the top. But it's really encouraging to see how quickly the chaff has basically become one with the rest of the materials. So that's really neat. It also doesn't seem to be causing issues with like clumping or anything like that. So I'm really happy with that. And I'm gonna continue to use it. So let me actually go ahead and grab a little bit more chaff. Just gonna set you up here while I go and grab that. All right, here we are. We're gonna add more chaff to the bin, just to cover over the food scraps that we just added. This is, I may have misspoken about chaff the last time I talked about it. So chaff is actually the skin of the coffee bean. And let me turn you so you can see. And the coffee bean is actually the seed. It's actually the seed of the coffee cherry. So coffee, the beverage that we all enjoy, actually derives from a plant. And it's actually the fruit of that plant is called the coffee cherry. It's actually a fleshy fruit, and that fruit has seeds. The seeds are what we take and we call them coffee beans. And when they are roasted, when the seeds are roasted, this little skin of the seed comes off in the process. And the chaff is very light. So you can see it just fall there. It's extremely light and airy. And it's actually a burn hazard, which is why, or it's a fire hazard rather. So that's one reason why it has to be taken out from the roaster at the roasting machine, so that it doesn't cause a fire. And so I'm able to get that from a local roaster and just layered it here over the top of the bin to cover over some of, not all of, you can still see some portions there, but that's going to help cover over the food scraps that we just put down. Another thing to note based on last time, or compared to last time, is that we are not really seeing a lot of flies. I haven't seen any flies actually, so it seems like the temperature is really taking care of that. So that's one encouraging update. So that is where we are leaving the bin this time. It's just covered with a nice layer of coffee chaff. And I've added the moisture in through the food largely. I'm also just gonna go ahead and for good measure, I'm just gonna water over the top of the bin with my spray bottle to kind of moisten the chaff. I think you might even be able to see right there. I think that might be I think it's a coffee bean. Sometimes a coffee bean or two will get through in the roasting process. Yep, that's a coffee bean. Turn it over. There it is. It's a coffee bean. So just toss that in there. And we're just trying to make sure that this bin stays nice and moist. And the more moist the bin is, the better for the worm reproduction. If it helps you to think about it as basically aiding them, obviously, in being able to move along. If the bin is too dry, it dries them out. So by adding water, we're basically adding a sort of lube, if you will, to the bin. And hopefully they enjoy that. Obviously, we don't want to flood the bin, but we want to add a good amount of moisture. And I really think that adding on the worm blanket has also really helped with the decomposition. So I'm really happy about that. So really excited to put that back over the top. But we are watering this thing really nice, trying to get it all nice and damp. And again, that's going to help with them allowing the microbes to have the moisture that they need to proliferate. And that is going to be what the worms are going after. So we want to make this as easy as possible for them to find the food that they need. So I've added a good bit of moisture there. I'm also going to top that with some eggshell. Let's get some of that out. You can see here, this is the container that I have of eggshell. Just going to get a little scoop of that. Here's my scoop of eggshell here. I'm going to sprinkle that over the top of this bin. We'll get one more for good measure. This is just a typical process that I like to do as I do each feeding, is to water it in and add the eggshell. So that is done. Now we're going to put the worm blanket back over the top. Again, I'd love for you to see the little fuzz that we've got growing there. And then this is just residue from the bin itself. And we're just going to tuck that in over the top. Making sure it's kind of nice and warm for our guys in there. And then last time I moistened the top of this, so I'll go ahead and do that again this time. Didn't seem to hurt things, and it's neat to see that the water actually did kind of soak in there. You can see the wet spot. Getting it nice and moist. And again, the takeaway from this week is that in the winter you want to keep your worm bin nice and moist so that the worms don't dry out. In the winter, you're going to have the air is going to be a little bit drier, and that you want to make sure that your worms are insulated against that by adding a little more moisture to the bin. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.